Elias Rowan walked along the observation ring of the trade station with a feeling he could not name. The station hung like a jewel in the blackness of space, its massive structure glinting with lights from hundreds of docking ships. Traders, diplomats, and tourists of dozens of species filled the corridors, all hurrying to their own worlds and duties. Humans were a minority here, and to many of the alien races that frequented the station, they were nothing more than curious anomalies, fragile, disorganized, and naive. Elias had been sent here to repair some minor systems in the station's outer communication arrays, but he had long learned to notice the small, unexpected things. That was why he stopped near the observation ring when he heard it. A soft, trembling sound floated across the metal walkways. At first he thought it was the wind or perhaps some distant machinery, but the sound was different. It had warmth. It had a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. He followed the melody to a small performance chamber where a group of aliens had gathered. At the center, a tall alien woman sang. Her skin shimmered in tones of silver and blue, reflecting the light in a way that made her look like she was part of the station itself. Her voice was strange but hauntingly beautiful, flowing in waves that seemed almost alive. Each note carried emotion beyond words, an ancient grief encoded into sound. Elias stood quietly at the edge of the gathering. The crowd seemed captivated, holding their breath as the alien continued. He noticed how her hands moved slightly, almost as if conducting invisible instruments that only she could see. The song twisted and turned in patterns he had never heard before, but despite its alien quality, it tugged at something inside him, something deep and unspoken. Humans as a species had a strange relationship with music. It was not just entertainment. It was memory, it was emotion, it was survival. Music had been part of human evolution for thousands of years. It had bound communities, calmed fears, expressed grief, and celebrated victories. But this song, this alien song, was different. It was structured in a way that seemed impossible to imitate. And yet, without thinking, Elias began to hum along, quietly at first, letting the melody find him. The effect was immediate. The alien's voice wavered slightly. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she faltered, as if realizing someone could follow her song, not just the notes, but the emotion behind them. The other aliens in the crowd murmured, surprised. None had expected a human to do more than awkwardly listen. Humans were observers, not participants. But Elias did not stop. He let the sound of his own voice join hers. He did not attempt to copy her, but rather responded, creating harmony without words. The song shifted in ways that no one could have predicted. Where it had been lonely, it became warm. Where it had been mournful, it became resilient. Where it had been fragile, it became strong. Salith, the alien woman, paused, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at him, her large, luminous eyes searching his face. Then slowly, almost cautiously, she continued. This time, she let him join fully, weaving his human voice into hers. The room held a collective silence, not of fear, but of astonishment. Elias felt a thrill he had not expected. He had never sung in front of anyone, especially not in the presence of aliens who could understand far more than humans could ever hope. Yet here he was, and somehow it felt natural. It was as if the song had been waiting for someone like him to arrive. Others began to record the moment with devices, whispering to one another about what was happening. Some of the aliens had never witnessed such a thing. Salith's species had songs meant to preserve history, to heal, to mourn, but never to grow with another being. Elias' voice did not just follow, it added a new dimension, a human dimension, and the effect was startling. Elias remembered something from Earth, a small memory from his childhood. His mother had once said that music was the closest thing to speaking the soul aloud. Perhaps humans could not sing with alien precision or manipulate frequencies the way Salith's people could, but they could respond in ways that no other species could. They could transform sound into shared feeling. They could turn melody into connection. Salith's song grew richer. She adjusted her rhythm slightly, responding to him as if they were conversing without words. The emotion of the room changed. What had been distant admiration became shared awe. The human observers felt included, no longer outsiders, and the aliens, who had long considered humans simple and limited, began to see something new. Something powerful. When the song finally ended, there was a moment of silence that stretched long enough to be almost painful. Then slowly the crowd erupted, not in applause because some of these species had no such tradition, but in murmurs of astonishment and whispers of wonder. Salith looked at Elias, a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and respect in her eyes. "How," she began, her voice uncertain, "how did you?" Humans had a talent for something aliens rarely achieved: true connection. The trade station itself seemed to notice the change. Monitors recorded neural activity of some alien visitors, showing unusual responses. Researchers whispered about something they could not explain. Elias paid them no mind. He only knew that in that small chamber something had shifted. Salith took a step closer. Your species, it responds to emotion in ways I cannot predict. Elias could sense that their encounter had consequences that neither of them could yet imagine. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but in the chamber something warm had begun. A human had sung with an alien, and the world, or at least this corner of the galaxy, would not be the same again. Salith studied him for a long moment. You are not like the others, she said finally. Most humans observe, you participate, you change the song. In the eyes of most galactic civilizations, they were fragile, short-lived, disorganized. But here, in this small chamber on the edge of human space, his voice had mattered. His species had mattered. For the first time in weeks, he felt a quiet, burning pride, not arrogance, but recognition. Humans were not weak. They had not yet been tested, but when they were, they had tools that no one else could match. Tools of resilience, tools of adaptability, and perhaps tools of connection. Do you want to try again? She asked suddenly, breaking his reverie. Elias laughed softly. I thought you'd never ask. Something that could, in time, reshape the way the galaxy saw humanity. Elias did not know what would come next. Wars, diplomacy, exploration. None of it mattered right now. What mattered was the song, the moment, and the quiet revelation that humans had a place in the galaxy far beyond what anyone had believed. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew this was only the beginning. After the song ended, the room was filled with a quiet hum of astonishment. Aliens whispered to each other in tones Elias could not understand, while some examined their recording devices with puzzled expressions. No one had expected a human to do what he had done. Humans were observers, mechanics, laborers, but singers of alien melodies. That was impossible, or so everyone had assumed. Salith stood in the center, her luminous eyes still fixed on Elias. Her hands trembled slightly, a rare sign of uncertainty from someone of her species. You understand more than you should, she said softly, almost to herself. Then she looked at him directly. Explain this, human. How did you respond to my song? You add something I have never experienced. The news of a human singing with an alien and creating a harmony no one thought possible traveled faster than any military dispatch. By the time Elias and Salith stepped back into the observation ring, a small crowd had gathered. Aliens whispered, some pointing at him, others looking at their recordings with confusion. The idea that humans could contribute something meaningful, something profound, was foreign to almost everyone here. Salith turned to him, her expression thoughtful. The Council will want to see this. They will want more. And we can respond in ways others cannot. Leaders of several species were already seated, their forms as diverse as the stars themselves. Some had wings, some had tentacles, some were humanoid but far taller and more imposing than humans. All eyes turned toward Elias as he entered with Salith. A murmur ran through the chamber. Humans were rarely included in such assemblies. They were not warriors, not diplomats, not scholars of renown. To most, they were a curiosity, fragile and inconsequential. But now, Elias held the attention of the room, not with threats or technology, but with a simple human voice. Salith stepped forward and addressed the council in her melodic, resonant tone. Members of the Galactic Assembly, I present to you an unexpected phenomenon. A human, Elias Rowan, has joined my song and created a harmony never before experienced. His species responds in ways we did not anticipate. We believe this may have consequences for our civilizations. How can a human's voice possibly affect our decisions? Others scowled, unwilling to admit that humans could possess any unusual skill. But the seed of curiosity had been planted. Salith nodded to Elias, and together they began to sing again. At first it was quiet, almost tentative. Then, as the council listened, the sound grew richer, deeper, and more complex. Notes intertwined, creating layers of feeling. Sadness became hope. Grief became determination. Fear became courage. The effect was immediate. Some council members leaned back, eyes wide, unable to comprehend the emotional depth. Others covered their faces, tears forming despite themselves. It was as if the song bypassed language, bypassed logic, and touched something deep in every being present. Elias felt a thrill of pride and awe. He was not just a human, he was a messenger of his species' unique strength. Humans could endure, adapt, and connect. They could change the mood of a room, a city, even a civilization, not through force, but through understanding and response. After the performance, the room was silent. Then slowly, one by one, the leaders began to speak. "This is remarkable," said a tall, insected diplomat. "I did not think humans capable of this." The galaxy was finally noticing humanity, not for what they lacked, but for what they offered. Not for their weakness, but for their ability to respond and adapt. Over the next few days, the Council continued to discuss the implications. Scholars recorded every nuance of the human-alien harmony. Scientists measured neurological responses in alien observers, discovering patterns that suggested a level of empathy and resonance previously unknown. Even military advisors began to reconsider the value of humans, not as soldiers, but as diplomats of emotion, capable of influencing situations without violence. Elias and Salith continued to work together, experimenting with variations of the song. Each time, the effect was slightly different, showing the adaptability of human response. They discovered that even subtle changes in pitch, timing, or tone could evoke different feelings, and that aliens of different species reacted uniquely. One day, as they rested in the observation ring, Salith spoke quietly. "I never imagined a species could affect others this way. We spent centuries perfecting songs for healing, for memory, for history, but we could never anticipate the response of a human. Music is just one way we do it." It was the beginning of a new role for his species in the galaxy. Word continued to spread. By the end of the week, news of the humans' performance had reached other stations, ships, and colonies. Some species were fascinated, others were fearful. Humans had become unpredictable variables in the galactic order, creatures who could not be ignored. Elias knew this was only the beginning. The Council would want more demonstrations, more proof. Some would test humans, push them, even try to exploit this unexpected skill. And yet he was ready. He had discovered something about his own species he had never fully understood. Humans did not need technology, armies, or wealth to influence the galaxy. They only needed themselves. Salith joined him again, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "Are you ready for what comes next?" she asked. Elias nodded, looking out at the stars beyond the observation ring. Ships came and went, carrying life and commerce across the void. But now every ship, every traveler, every alien could not help but consider the human species differently. They were small, yes, fragile, perhaps, but unpredictable, adaptive, connected, and that made them powerful. "I am," he said quietly. "The galaxy doesn't know it yet, but humans are listening, and we respond better than anyone expects. Then let us see what happens when the galaxy truly hears you." Humans were no longer observers. They were participants, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Aliens of dozens of species, some of them massive and fearsome, sat in tense silence as Elias and Salith prepared to perform once more. The memory of their previous performance still lingered in the minds of every attendee. The song had shifted emotions in ways no one had expected. Leaders who had prided themselves on rationality and strategy now remembered the warmth, the connection, the human influence they had felt. But the council was not here merely to witness art. Some had already begun to speculate about power. The Kyler, a warlike species known for conquering through sheer force, were uneasy. They had armies that could wipe out entire planets, yet they now watched a human, a fragile creature by their standards, command attention and influence through song. Salith took a deep breath, adjusting her posture as she looked at Elias. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Elias nodded. "I've never been more ready." "Let's do what humans do best: listen, respond, and connect." The council members carried their own emotions, doubt, fear, pride, hope, and the song reacted. Every note they sang together seemed to bend to the feelings in the room. Humans had evolved to notice and respond. It was instinctual, almost impossible to explain, and yet here it was. Elias could sense the mood of the council, the collective uncertainty, and the subtle tension among rival species. He adjusted his voice, matching the cadence of Salith's song while weaving in tones that soothed fear and invited curiosity. At first, the council did not react noticeably, but then a ripple spread. A reptilian elder who had been glaring at the humans leaned back, her scales shimmering as she relaxed slightly. A pair of winged delegates who had been frowning now tilted their heads, listening more intently. Even the Kyler, whose armored forms seemed immovable, shifted in their seats, their posture less rigid. The song grew stronger, more complex. Salith's alien tones interlaced with Elia's human voice in a pattern that none of the council members could anticipate. It was not mimicry, not control, it was dialogue. Human response met alien melody, creating something entirely new, something no species had ever experienced. By the time the song reached its climax, the council was no longer a room of rivals and strangers. They were a room of listeners, connected through the resonance Elias and Salith had created. Doubt gave way to wonder. Pride gave way to humility. Fear gave way to possibility. When the last note faded, silence hung in the air like a fragile bubble. Then slowly the murmurs began. One by one the leaders spoke. "This is unprecedented," said a tall, thin species with translucent skin. "Humans, they affect others in ways we cannot predict." This could change negotiations entirely. Humans had power, yes, but it was subtle, adaptive, and emotional. That kind of power was harder to defend against than a fleet of ships or a battery of weapons. Over the next few days, the galaxy began to notice. Reports of Elia's and Salith's performances spread from one station to the next, traveling faster than any official dispatch. Some species were fascinated, others were afraid. Humans had become a variable in galactic politics, an unknown quantity that could no longer be ignored. Galactic scientists began to study the phenomenon. Neural scans of alien council members during the song revealed patterns no one had seen before. Emotional centers lit up. Synapses fired in ways that suggested empathy and understanding, even among species that rarely experienced either. Humans, it seemed, had an instinctive ability to harmonize with others, not just in music, but in feeling. One evening, after a long day of demonstrations and council debates, Elias and Salith walked along the observation ring. The station glowed with the lights of 1,000 stars, reflected in the metal walls and the distant curves of ships in orbit. "Do you understand what this means?" Salith asked quietly. "You have changed how the galaxy sees your species. Others will try to destroy it before it spreads too far." Over the next week, Elias and Salith traveled to several nearby colonies and outposts, demonstrating the song and its effects. Everywhere they went, reactions were the same: fascination, awe, fear. Alien leaders who had once dismissed humans as weak now approached with caution, unsure whether to trust or fear this species that had mastered influence without force. In one colony, a diplomatic delegation tried to test the humans. They arranged a scenario where two rival species were on the brink of conflict, hoping to see whether the human influence could truly stabilize emotions. Elias and Salith entered the chamber, began their song, and as before, the effect was immediate. The rivals paused, felt the emotion carried by the melody, and slowly began to reconsider their actions. Where violence had been inevitable, dialogue emerged instead. The delegation was astonished. "This is impossible," one alien said. "No species has ever achieved this." "We connect." "Do you think they will attack us?" Elias asked quietly. Salith considered. "Some will try, others will attempt to control you, but humans are adaptive. You respond in ways no one expects. That makes you stronger than many fleets of ships or armies." They had endured plagues, disasters, wars, and challenges from far stronger species. And now, even in the vast galaxy, they could survive in ways no one had predicted, not by fighting, but by understanding. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humans were not merely observers or workers. They were unpredictable, adaptive, and capable of shaping events in ways others could not comprehend. Where technology or weapons failed, humans could succeed with insight, empathy, and the subtle power of connection. That night, Elias lay in his quarters thinking about what had happened. He knew that this was only the beginning. The council would want more demonstrations. Some factions would seek to control humans to use them for their own ends. Others would fear them and perhaps plot against them. But for the first time, humans were recognized not for their weakness, but for their strength. Strength that was quiet, strength that was subtle, strength that came from the ability to respond, to connect, and to influence without force. Elias closed his eyes and thought of Earth, the planet of resilience, of determination, of humans who had survived against impossible odds. He realized that everything that had made humans seem fragile was also what made them powerful. They could adapt. They could endure. They could change the course of events simply by listening and responding. And in the galaxy, that was a strength no one could ignore. The galaxy was beginning to notice humanity. Word of Elias and Salith's performances had spread far beyond the trade station. Reports of their influence traveled from colony to colony, from diplomatic centers to distant mining outposts. In every corner, beings of countless species whispered about the humans who could alter emotions, change decisions, and reshape conflicts, not with weapons, but with song and understanding. But with attention came danger. Not every species welcomed this shift. Some feared it, some wanted to control it. And some, the warlike factions that had long measured power by fleets and firepower, saw humanity as a threat that could not be contained through conventional means. Elias and Salith were summoned to a neutral planet for a high-level meeting. The planet was a fortress of diplomacy, its surface dotted with massive halls and observation towers. Representatives from several major civilizations had gathered, including the Kyler, who had a reputation for taking what they wanted by force. The Council hoped to test humans further, to see if they could maintain influence under pressure or if the weight of intimidation would break them. Elias felt a flicker of unease, but it was tempered by confidence. Humans had survived in far harsher conditions. They had endured disaster, disease, and invasion. And now, in this moment, they would survive again through adaptability, intelligence, and connection. The chamber was massive, shaped like a crescent with towering panels of crystal and metal. Delegates from dozens of species filled the seats, each observing humans with curiosity, caution, or outright suspicion. At the center of the chamber, a platform was prepared for the performance, a performance that in reality was more than entertainment. It was diplomacy, negotiation, and a subtle test of power. Salith whispered to Elias as they stepped forward. This is not just about music. This is about influence. You must respond, not react. Observe, understand, and guide. He could sense tension in the Kyler delegation, unease in the reptilian elders, and curiosity in the insectoid diplomats. Every note he sang was shaped by their emotions, creating a dialogue they could not anticipate or resist. Something remarkable happened. The song did not just affect individual listeners. It influenced the group as a whole. Delegates who had arrived ready for conflict began to reconsider. Those who had been ready to manipulate or intimidate found themselves opening, listening, and even questioning their assumptions. Elias and Salith were not controlling the room. They were responding to it, amplifying connection and understanding in a way no species had ever done before. Hours passed as they refined the song, exploring variations and observing reactions. Some delegates attempted to resist, using subtle gestures and commands to regain control of their emotions, but the human response adapted. Elias sensed their resistance and adjusted the melody, not forcefully but gently. The result was astounding. Those who tried to dominate began to feel their own hostility softened, replaced by curiosity and reflection. After the performance, silence filled the chamber. Then slowly, leaders began to speak. "This is more than music," said one elder, his voice trembling with disbelief. "It is influence, human influence. And it is subtle but undeniable. That is our strength. But they cannot be ignored, because their way of thinking and feeling is unlike any other species." Elias realized that humans were at a crossroads. The galaxy had noticed them, and now it would test them. Some tests would be subtle in negotiations and diplomacy. Others would be direct challenges in ways that could put humans at risk. But he was not afraid. Humans had survived because they adapted, because they observed, and because they responded intelligently to every situation. In the days that followed, incidents began to occur across the galaxy. Minor conflicts that had been escalating suddenly cooled after human performances. Rival colonies reconsidered hostilities. Disputes between traders were resolved without violence. Reports came in of leaders changing decisions after hearing the humans' voices, even remotely. The galaxy was changing, not because of force, but because humans had reminded it of something it had forgotten. Connection mattered, but not all changes were peaceful. Some factions began plotting to control or eliminate the human influence. Intelligence reports reached Elias and Salith showing attempts to trap humans into performances that could be exploited for political gain. There were whispers of attacks, sabotage, and attempts to discredit humanity. Elias felt the weight of responsibility. Humans were no longer just observers. They were participants in the galaxy, capable of influencing events in ways no one had expected. And that influence was both powerful and dangerous. One evening, as they prepared for another demonstration, Salith spoke quietly. "You must understand, Elias, not everyone will welcome this. Some will fear it, others will try to control it. But humans are adaptable. You respond, and that is your greatest strength." That is how we shape the galaxy without conquering it. As they began to sing, Elias felt the tension immediately. The factions were bristling with hostility, ready to strike. But humans had an advantage no other species possessed. Elias observed, listened, and adapted. He did not try to control the emotions forcibly. Instead, he reflected them, acknowledged them, and guided them toward understanding. Salith followed his lead, her alien tones intertwining with his human voice. Slowly, the room changed. Hostility softened into caution. Anger became curiosity. Fear became openness. The factions began to speak to each other, first in whispers, then in dialogue. Where conflict had been inevitable, understanding emerged. When the final note faded, the chamber was transformed. Leaders who had prepared for war now found themselves negotiating peace. Elias realized the magnitude of what they had achieved. Humans could alter events without violence, without domination, and yet with more impact than any weapon. Outside the chamber, news spread rapidly. The story of humans preventing a war through song reached stations, colonies, and fleets. Some celebrated. Others grew wary. Humanity had become a force, one that could not be measured by technology, fleets, or armies. Their power was subtle, adaptive, and profound. Salith looked at Elias, her expression a mix of awe and concern. You have changed the galaxy, but change always brings resistance. You must be prepared. We respond. That is how we endure, and that is how we influence. In the quiet of the observation ring that evening, Elias looked out at the stars. Ships traveled through the darkness, carrying life, commerce, and diplomacy. Humans were no longer passive observers. They were participants. They were influential, and the galaxy had only just begun to realize it. He felt a quiet determination settle over him. Humans were underestimated, yes, but that underestimation was their advantage. They could act where others could not, adapt where others could not, and respond where others would fail. That was humanity's greatest strength, and the galaxy was about to learn it, one song at a time. The galaxy had begun to change. News of human influence spread farther than any fleet or weapon could reach. Everywhere, beings of countless species spoke of Elias Rowan and the alien Salith, the humans who did not fight with weapons but with understanding, empathy, and song. In every council chamber, outpost, and trade station, aliens debated what it meant. Some were fearful, others were hopeful, all were curious. Elias stood on the observation ring of the trade station, looking out at the endless black dotted with stars. He remembered the first time he had heard Salith sing, the first time he had joined her melody, and the astonishment that had followed. Now, after months of performances, councils, and demonstrations, he could feel the weight of responsibility. Humans were no longer passive. They were participants, and the galaxy was watching. Salith approached, her luminescent eyes bright against the reflection of distant ships. They are ready, she said. Not all, but enough. The galaxy is beginning to understand your species. And that is enough. The chamber was massive, designed to host thousands, with holographic displays showing delegates from distant worlds joining remotely. Every major civilization had sent a representative. Some were eager, some skeptical, and some openly hostile. The Kyler were present, their armor gleaming, eyes narrowed in suspicion. But Elias felt no fear. Humans had survived far greater challenges than this. Salith took his hand briefly, a silent gesture of support. Are you ready? Elias joined carefully, responding with tones shaped by observation, empathy, and instinct. This was not imitation. It was dialogue. It was humanity. The effect was immediate. Delegates who had arrived tense and defensive relaxed, their expressions softening. Beings from species known for aggression and domination leaned forward, curiosity overtaking suspicion. Elias could feel the collective mood of the assembly, sensing hesitation, hope, fear, and pride. He adjusted his voice subtly, guiding the emotions toward balance, toward understanding, toward connection. Minutes passed, then hours. The song evolved, layering human response over alien melody, creating something entirely new. Representatives who had long resisted collaboration found themselves speaking to one another, negotiating small agreements and compromises in whispers. The room, once tense with centuries of mistrust, became a space of shared experience. Elias marveled at the subtle power of humans. They did not need fleets, armies, or weapons to influence the galaxy. All they needed was themselves, their ability to perceive, to adapt, and to respond. And in this moment, the galaxy was learning that lesson in a way no species had anticipated. After the final notes faded, silence filled the chamber. Then, slowly, delegates began to speak. "This is extraordinary," said a tall, insectoid diplomat. Humans have done what centuries of negotiation could not achieve. They have created understanding where there was only division. And when the galaxy listens, we can prevent destruction instead of causing it. Over the next few days, the demonstration's effects spread. Trade disputes were resolved. Minor conflicts cooled. Colonies that had been preparing for war reconsidered their actions. The influence of humanity was subtle but undeniable. The galaxy had begun to see that humans could achieve more through understanding than others could with fleets or weapons. Salith and Elias continued to perform, refining the songs and observing responses. Each performance revealed something new about human potential. They discovered that even small changes in tone or phrasing could create vastly different emotional outcomes. Humans were not just responsive, they were adaptable in real time, capable of perceiving and influencing complex social dynamics in ways no other species could. One evening, as they rested on the observation ring, Salith spoke quietly. "You have changed everything, Ilias. The galaxy will never be the same. Humans are no longer observers. You are leaders in a way no one anticipated. Some will attempt to control you. Others will try to destroy what they cannot understand. And now, in the vastness of space, their adaptability and empathy were becoming a force the galaxy could not ignore." The final demonstration was arranged on a neutral planet, one that had been a flashpoint for conflict for decades. Leaders from opposing factions gathered, wary and tense, each expecting negotiations to fail. Elias and Salith stepped forward, knowing that this performance would test the full power of human influence. The song began as before, Salith's voice rising with ancient emotion, Elias joining with human response. But this time, the stakes were higher. The delegates had brought advisors, security forces, and monitors, all observing for signs of manipulation or weakness. The pressure was immense, yet Elias felt calm. Humans thrived under challenge. He observed, listened, and adapted. The song flowed, carrying layers of emotion, history, and connection. Delegates who had arrived hostile began to soften. Suspicion turned to curiosity. Fear gave way to tentative trust. Hours passed, and the song evolved, a dialogue of species and emotions. Representatives who had been preparing for confrontation found themselves negotiating compromises, reaching agreements, and understanding perspectives they had previously dismissed. Where violence had been inevitable, dialogue emerged. When the final note faded, the chamber was transformed. Leaders stood, some in awe, some hesitant, but all recognizing the impact humans had made. They had achieved what centuries of diplomacy, fleets, and treaties had failed to accomplish: understanding, connection, and a measure of peace. Outside, news spread rapidly. Humans were now recognized not as fragile observers but as essential participants in galactic affairs. Some celebrated, others were wary, but none could ignore the impact. Humanity had proven that intelligence, empathy, and adaptability could shape the galaxy in ways no technology or weapon could. Salith turned to Elias, her expression a mix of pride and wonder. "You have done it. The galaxy has heard you. Humans are no longer underestimated. Humans will continue to observe, adapt, and respond. That is how we survive. And that is how we will influence the galaxy, without conquering, without violence, simply by being ourselves." Humanity had entered a new role, not rulers but connectors, diplomats, and guides for understanding. Elias looked at Salith. "Do you think they will ever forget what humans can do?" Humans have changed the galaxy without striking a single blow. It was not domination. It was humanity, resilient, adaptive, and endlessly capable, and the galaxy would never be the same again.